The stranger who saved my son's life became the man I loved. Then I found out whose brother he was. My son stopped breathing on wet asphalt, while I screamed for anyone to help. A man I'd never seen before knelt down, tilted my boy's head back, and promised me he wouldn't let him die. He kept that promise. Then he kept showing up, fixing things, teaching things, becoming the father my son never had. Until the day my son pointed at a magazine and said, "Mom, why do you have a picture of him?" It wasn't him, it was his billionaire brother. The same man who walked away 9 years ago when I said I was pregnant. The rain had started the way trouble always does, without warning. Without mercy. One minute the October sky was pale and cooperative. The next, it split open. Jerry, 8 years old and fearless, had been 20 feet ahead of me on his bike, his helmet, that obnoxious neon yellow I'd insisted on. He was laughing, actually laughing, racing the puddles forming in the crosswalk like they were finish lines in some game only 8-year-olds understand. I was carrying 2 grocery bags and trying not to slip in shoes that had no business being worn in weather. Then I heard it. The sound I'll carry for the rest of my life, metal scraping pavement, then a dull, wet thud that didn't sound like a fall. It sounded like something breaking. The kind of break that doesn't heal clean. Remember this sound, because it's going to matter later, in ways I couldn't have predicted. The grocery bags hit the sidewalk. Oranges rolled into the gutter. I ran. Jerry was twisted on the asphalt in a way that made my stomach lurch, one leg bent underneath him. His bike, his pride, the one we'd scraped together money for last Christmas, was 10 feet away, front wheel still spinning. The helmet had cracked clean through. Right down the center. Like an egg, his chest wasn't moving. Someone screamed. It might have been me. Cars had stopped. Brake lights glowed red through the rain. Voices blurred together. "Call 911. Don't move him. Oh my God, is he?" I dropped to my knees. The pavement was cold, soaked, rain mixing with something else I didn't want to identify. My hands were shaking so hard, I couldn't get them to work right. I touched his face. His skin was warm. That had to mean something. That had to mean he was still. "Ma'am?" The voice came from behind me. Calm. Too calm for what was happening. "Ma'am, I'm here. I've got him." I turned. A man pushed through the crowd that had formed, people with phones out, people just staring, people doing nothing useful. He wasn't running. He was moving with purpose, the way someone moves when panic isn't an option. Dark hair slicked flat from the rain, dress shirt soaked through and clinging to his shoulders. No jacket. He looked at Jerry, not at me, and his expression didn't change. But here's what you need to understand about this moment. Most people freeze. Most people stand back and wait for professionals. Most people assume someone else will handle it. This man didn't. He knelt beside us, without hesitation. His hands went to Jerry's neck, 2 fingers pressed just under his jaw, counting. Then his other hand tilted Jerry's chin up slightly, opening his airway with the kind of precision that told me this wasn't the first time he'd done this. "Jerry," he said gently, like he already knew my son's name. "Buddy, stay with me." My throat closed. I couldn't breathe either. I grabbed his arm, this stranger's arm, and my nails dug into the wet fabric of his sleeve. "Please," I whispered. The word came out broken. "Please don't let him die." He looked up at me then. Dark eyes, steady, not afraid. "He won't," he said. "I promise you, I won't let him." And for reasons I still can't explain, I believed him. Now pay close attention to what he does next. He shrugged off his jacket, expensive, I noticed later, the kind with actual stitching and a label I didn't recognize, and folded it under Jerry's head without a word. Rain poured down his back. He didn't flinch. He checked Jerry's pulse again, tilted his head, watched his chest. "Come on, Jerry," he murmured. "Come on, buddy." The sirens came from somewhere far away, then suddenly close. Paramedics appeared. The man stepped back just enough to let them work, but he didn't leave. He stayed right there, rain dripping from his hair, arms crossed, watching. One of the paramedics glanced at him. "You keep his airway open?" The man nodded. "Good call." Swelling could have cut off his breathing. What the paramedic didn't say, what I found out later, was that those first 60 seconds are everything. That brain damage starts in minutes. That this stranger's quick response was the difference between my son surviving and my son becoming a statistic. But that's not even the most important part of this story. The paramedic said something else, something about response time and minutes mattering. But I wasn't listening anymore. They were lifting Jerry onto a stretcher. I was trying to stand, but my legs wouldn't work. Someone's hand, firm, warm, gripped my elbow and steadied me. The man. "You're riding with him," he said. "Not a question, a fact." I nodded. "Go." They loaded Jerry into the ambulance. I climbed in after him. The doors slammed shut. Through the rear window, I saw the man still standing there in the rain, hands in his pockets now, watching us pull away. I didn't even know his name. And I had no idea he'd become the most important person in my life. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, too bright, too sterile. I sat in a chair outside the ER with my arms wrapped around myself, still soaking wet, waiting for someone to tell me whether my son was going to live or die. They'd taken him back immediately. A nurse with kind eyes had told me he was stable, conscious, asking for me. I'd cried then, right there in the hallway. Big, ugly sobs that I couldn't control. A doctor came out 20 minutes later. Concussion, bruised ribs. Miraculously, no internal bleeding. The helmet saved his life, she said. And whoever kept his airway clear in those first minutes, that mattered too. I thought about the man in the rain. The stranger who didn't hesitate. They let me see Jerry an hour later. He looked so small in that hospital bed, hooked up to monitors that beeped steadily. His eyes opened when I walked in. "Mom," he whispered. His voice was hoarse. "Did my bike make it?" I laughed. It came out like a sob. "We'll get you a new one." "But I liked that one." "I know, baby. I know." I sat beside him and held his hand until he fell asleep. And that's when my mind finally caught up to what had happened. A stranger had saved my son's life, and then disappeared. I didn't expect to see the man again. But when I walked out into the hallway an hour later, he was there. Sitting in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs near the vending machines. Still wet. Still wearing that soaked dress shirt, now wrinkled and clinging in all the wrong places. There was blood on his knuckles, scraped raw from where he'd knelt on the asphalt. He looked out of place, like someone who belonged in boardrooms, not hospital waiting rooms. He stood when he saw me. "I wanted to make sure he was okay," he said simply. For a moment, I couldn't speak. This stranger, this man who'd come out of nowhere, had saved my son and then waited to make sure. When was the last time anyone had waited for me? If you've ever been the person who handles everything alone, you know exactly what that moment felt like. "He will be," I said finally. My voice cracked. "Because of you." He shook his head. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No," I said. "You didn't. Most people don't. Most people just stand there." He didn't argue. He just nodded, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, like he didn't quite know what to do with gratitude. "I'm Darlene," I said. "Kane." We stood there in that fluorescent hallway, rain still dripping from both of us, and something passed between us that I didn't have words for yet. Not attraction, not quite. Something quieter. Relief. Recognition. The kind of acknowledgement that happens when someone shows up in the worst moment of your life and doesn't look away. "Thank you," I said again. He met my eyes. "You don't have to keep thanking me. I don't know how to stop." The corner of his mouth lifted. Almost a smile. Not quite. "He's a tough kid," Kane said. "He gets that from me." This time, he did smile. Small. Real. I believed that. He turned to leave, and panic flared in my chest. I didn't want him to go. Not yet. Not when he was the only solid thing in a day that had shattered into 1,000 pieces. "Wait," I said. He stopped, turned back. Can I get your number? I'd like to thank you properly. When things aren't so chaotic? Yeah." He pulled a business card from his wallet, somehow still dry, and handed it to me. Simple. Black text. Kane Parrish. Financial Consulting. I stared at the card. Parrish. Something about that name tugged at the back of my mind, but I was too exhausted to chase it. A detail I should have paid attention to. A warning I missed completely. "Call if you need anything," he said. "Really." And then he was gone. But the story? The story was just beginning. Jerry came home 2 days later with strict instructions to rest and a prescription for painkillers he refused to take, because they made him feel weird. I set him up on the couch, with pillows, blankets, and a stack of his favorite books. He lasted an hour before complaining about being bored. I was in the kitchen trying to figure out how to make chicken soup from scratch, something I'd never successfully done when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door. Kane stood on my porch, hands in his pockets, looking slightly uncertain. He was wearing jeans this time, a gray sweater. He looked more human, less like someone who'd walked out of a rainstorm and into my life. "Hi," he said. "Hi. He held up a bag. "I brought some things for Jerry. Comic books." Figured he might be climbing the walls by now. I stared at him. He shifted his weight. "Is that weird?" "That's probably weird. I can go." "No," I said quickly. "No, it's not weird. It's really kind." His shoulders relaxed. I let him in. Jerry's face lit up when he saw Kane. Actual joy. The kind kids reserve for people they've decided are safe. "You're the guy," Jerry said, trying to sit up too fast and wincing. "Easy," Kane said, moving to the couch. "No sudden moves, remember?" I remember. The doctor said my brain got shook up like a snow globe. Kane laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from relief, not politeness. He sat on the edge of the couch and handed Jerry the bag. My son tore into it like Christmas morning comics, a puzzle book, a small stuffed dog with floppy ears. "His name's Chester," Kane said. "Hospital gift shop." I thought. Well, I thought he might want company. Jerry hugged the dog immediately. I stood in the doorway, watching this man I didn't know sit with my son like it was the most natural thing in the world, and I felt something inside me shift. Something dangerous. Something that felt a lot like hope. And I couldn't afford hope. Not with men. Not anymore. Because the last time I trusted a man who made promises, he disappeared before Jerry was even born. And I'd learned the hard way that hope was just another word for setting yourself up to fall. But what I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have predicted, was that Kane showing up with comic books was just the beginning. Because this man, he kept showing up. And that changes everything. Kane didn't leave after 20 minutes like I expected. He stayed for an hour. Then 2, sitting on the floor beside the couch while Jerry worked through one of the puzzle books, occasionally offering hints, but mostly just being there. Present in a way that didn't demand anything. No awkward small talk, no checking his phone every 5 minutes. Just a man who seemed genuinely content to watch an 8-year-old struggle with a word search. And here's what you need to understand about that kind of presence. It's rare. Most people show up once: guilt, obligation, performance. They do the visible thing. The thing that looks good. The thing they can tell people about later. Then, they disappear. But Kane didn't disappear. When Jerry finally dozed off, pain meds kicking in despite his protests, Kane stood quietly and followed me into the kitchen. "Thank you," I said for what felt like the 100th time. He shook his head. "You're going to wear that phrase out." "Probably." He picked up his keys from the counter, hesitated. "If you need anything while he's recovering, groceries, errands, whatever, just call." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Because men didn't do this. They didn't show up with comic books and stuffed dogs and mean it. They didn't offer help without a hidden invoice attached. At least, not in my experience. Kane left through the front door, and I watched through the window as he walked to a car that probably cost more than I made in a year. He didn't look back. I told myself that was the last time I'd see him. I was wrong. He came back 3 days later with a bike chain repair kit. "Jerry mentioned his chain was loose," Kane said from my doorway, holding up the small toolkit like it was evidence in his defense. "Thought I could take a look." "If that's okay." It wasn't okay. It was too much. Too thoughtful. Too consistent with the kind of man I'd stopped believing existed. "Sure," I heard myself say anyway. Kane spent 40 minutes in the garage with Jerry's mangled bike, the one with the bent frame and cracked paint from the accident. He didn't try to fix what couldn't be fixed. He just cleaned the chain, oiled the gears, straightened what could be straightened. Jerry sat beside him the entire time on an overturned crate, asking questions Kane answered without condescension. "Why do you oil the chain?" "Keeps it from rusting. Makes it run smoother." "How do you know how to do this stuff?" Kane paused. Something flickered across his face, brief, distant. "Had a bike when I was your age." Learned by breaking things until I figured out how to fix them. Did your dad teach you? No. The word came out flat, final, then softer. I taught myself. Jerry seemed to sense the door closing. He didn't push. I watched from the kitchen window, drying the same dish 3 times, and wondered what kind of childhood taught a man to save strangers in the rain and fix broken things without being asked. But what happened next? That's when I started to realize something was different about Kane. Kane developed a pattern. He showed up every few days. Never announced, never intrusive. Always with a reason that made sense on the surface, dropping off soup from a restaurant downtown, bringing Jerry a book about engineers, asking if I needed anything from the hardware store since he was going anyway. I started recognizing the tells. The way he knocked 3 soft raps, never demanding. The way he stood on the porch, with his hands in his pockets, weight slightly back, like he was ready to leave if I said the word. The way he drank his coffee black, no sugar, holding the mug with both hands, like it anchored him. The way he listened to Jerry with his full attention, never half present, never distracted. And the way he never touched me. Not casually, not accidentally. Like he'd drawn an invisible boundary and refused to cross it without explicit permission. It was the opposite of pursuit. It was presence. And I didn't know what to do with that. Now here's where it gets important. Because what Kane was doing, this consistency, this showing up without expectation, was dismantling every defense I'd built over 9 years of doing everything alone. 2 weeks after the accident, Kane arrived with takeout. "You've been cooking for Jerry nonstop," he said. "Thought you might want a break. Thai food. My favorite." I hadn't mentioned that. "How did you?" "Jerry told me," Kane said, reading my face. "Kid's observant. Said you always order pad thai when you're tired." Something in my chest tightened. We ate at the kitchen table, me, Jerry, Kane. Like it was normal. Like this man belonged in our tiny dining space with the chipped plates and mismatched chairs. Jerry talked non-stop about a science project, and Kane asked follow-up questions that proved he was actually listening. "So the volcano is supposed to erupt?" Kane asked. "Yeah, but mine just oozed, like sad lava." "Sad lava," I repeated, and suddenly I was laughing. Really laughing. Not the polite kind, not the guarded kind, the kind that came from somewhere genuine and surprised me as much as it surprised Kane. He looked at me with something I couldn't name. Something warm. "Sad lava is an underrated scientific category," Kane said, completely serious. Jerry grinned. "That's what I told my teacher." And just like that, sitting at my kitchen table with cheap takeout, and a man I barely knew, I felt something I hadn't felt in 9 years. Normal. Not like a woman doing everything alone. Not like someone constantly braced for the next disaster. Just normal. It was terrifying. If you've ever been the person who learned not to need anyone, you know exactly why that feeling scared me more than anything. Later that night, after Jerry was asleep and Kane was getting ready to leave, I walked him to the door. "You don't have to keep doing this," I said quietly. He stopped, turned. "Doing what?" "Showing up, helping, being." I trailed off, not sure how to finish. "Here?" Kane offered. "Yeah." He studied me for a long moment. The hallway light cast shadows across his face. And I noticed for the first time how tired he looked. Like someone carrying weight he didn't talk about. "Do you want me to stop?" he asked. The honest answer was no. The safe answer was yes. "I don't know what I want," I admitted. Kane nodded slowly. "Fair enough." He didn't push, didn't ask for clarity I couldn't give, didn't make it about him. "Jerry likes having you around," I said instead. "And you?" The question hung between us. Direct, no games. I could have deflected, should have deflected. "I'm not good at this," I said finally. "At what?" "Trusting people who show up." Something in his expression shifted. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. "Someone didn't stay," Kane said. Not a question. I looked away. Something like that. "I'm not him." The certainty in his voice made me meet his eyes again. "You don't know that," I whispered. "Yes," Kane said quietly. "I do." He left a few minutes later, and I stood in the doorway long after his taillights disappeared down the street. The truth was, I was starting to believe him. I believed he'd keep showing up. Keep fixing broken bike chains and bringing sad lava jokes and sitting on my garage floor with my son, I believed he wasn't performing kindness for an audience. I believed he saw us, really saw us, and chose to stay anyway. And that scared me more than anything. Because the last man I believed in had looked me in the eye 9 years ago, and promised forever. He had kissed me in the rain, and talked about building a life, and made me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. Then I got pregnant. And he became someone I couldn't reach, couldn't find, couldn't hold accountable. He chose his ambition over us, chose board meetings and business empires, and a version of himself that didn't include a woman who reminded him of who he was before the money. I never told him about Jerry. By the time I knew, he'd already made his choice clear. And now here was Cain, different in every measurable way, and my body remembered the lesson even if my heart wanted to forget it. Men leave. They just do it in different timetables. Some vanish before the baby comes. Some wait until you've built a life around them and leave bigger craters when they go. Cain would leave too, eventually. They always did. But 3 days later, he showed up again. And 4 days after that, and the day Jerry's follow-up appointment confirmed he was healing perfectly, Cain was the first person I called. "He's okay?" Cain asked, and I heard relief in his voice. Real relief. "He's okay." "Good. That's really good, Darlene." I stood in the hospital parking lot with my phone pressed to my ear, and I realized something that made my hands shake. I had called him first. Not my sister, not my coworker, not anyone who'd been in my life for years. Him. A man I'd known for less than a month. A man whose last name still tugged at something in my memory I couldn't quite place. A man who kept showing up like it cost him nothing when I knew better everything cost something. "Darlene?" Cain's voice pulled me back. "You still there?" "Yeah," I said. "I'm here. Want me to bring dinner tonight? Celebrate?" I should have said no. Should have thanked him and created distance, and remembered all the reasons why letting people in meant giving them power to leave. "Yes," I whispered instead. And when I hung up, I sat in my car with my hands gripping the steering wheel and admitted the truth I'd been avoiding for weeks. I felt safe with Cain. Safe in a way I hadn't felt since before I learned what it meant to be left. Safe in a way that made me want to stay in moments instead of bracing for their endings. Safe in a way that was going to destroy me when he eventually walked away. Because he would. They all did. But the worst part wasn't that he'd leave. The worst part was that I was starting to hope he wouldn't. And hope, I'd learned, was just another word for setting yourself up to break. But what I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have seen coming, was that Cain's last name wasn't just familiar. It was connected to the man who broke me. And that truth was about to surface in the worst possible way. Look, if you've ever been in a situation where you wanted to trust someone but your past kept screaming at you to run, you're not alone. A lot of us watching this have been there. We've been the person who learned that safety is temporary and people leave. If this story is hitting you somewhere deep, stay with me. There's more to this than just one woman's journey. And if you want to be part of a community that understands what it means to rebuild after everything falls apart, hit that subscribe button, because we tell stories here about women who survive, not just survive, who find their way back to hoping again, even when hope feels dangerous. There was a name I stopped saying 9 years ago. A name that used to taste like possibility. Like late nights in college apartments, where the heating barely worked, but we didn't notice because we had each other. Like promises made in parking lots before dawn when he'd walk me to my car after double shifts at the diner and kiss me like I was the only real thing in his world. Melvin. I stopped saying it out loud the day I realized I was talking to ghosts. And here's what most people don't understand about loving someone who leaves. You don't just lose them. You lose the version of yourself who believed in them. That's the part that cuts deepest. We met when we were 23. He was finishing his MBA, I was finishing my teaching degree and working 3 jobs to pay for it. He had ambition that burned so bright it left scorch marks on everything it touched. I had the kind of optimism that comes from not yet knowing how the world works. He talked about changing things, building things, creating something that mattered. I believed him because he believed himself with a certainty that felt like truth. "I'm going to make something of myself," he'd say, lying on his back on my apartment floor because I didn't own a couch yet. "Something real, and you're going to be right there with me." I was young enough to think, with me meant beside me. I didn't know it meant behind me, supporting from a distance that grows wider every year. The shift started small. A networking event he couldn't miss, a dinner with investors that ran late, weekend trips that turned into week-long conferences. His phone buzzing at 2 in the morning with opportunities that couldn't wait. I told myself it was temporary, that once he got established, once he proved himself, once the business took off, then we'd have time again. I was good at telling myself things that weren't true. By the time his startup got funded, I'd become something he scheduled. Tuesday nights when he wasn't traveling, Sunday mornings if the week wasn't too demanding. I fit into the margins of his calendar, and I accepted it because I thought that's what love looked like when someone was building a dream. I didn't realize I wasn't part of the dream anymore. I was just the person who remembered who he used to be, and that made him uncomfortable. The pregnancy test showed positive on a Thursday in March. I remember because it was raining. Different rain than the day Jerry got hurt. This was the soft kind, the kind that whispers instead of screams. I sat on the bathroom floor of my tiny apartment, staring at 2 pink lines, and I felt something I couldn't name. Terror, joy, both, neither. I called Melvin. He was in Phoenix for a pitch meeting. He said he'd call me back. He didn't. I called again the next day. Voicemail. The day after that, he texted, "Swamped. Can we talk this weekend?" I should have known then. Can you imagine? Finding out you're pregnant and the person who's supposed to share that moment with you can't be bothered to return your call? But I waited until Saturday. Made his favorite dinner, wore the dress he liked, set the table like we were celebrating something, because maybe we were. Maybe this was the thing that would pull us back together. Maybe a baby was the anchor we needed. He arrived 40 minutes late, with his phone in his hand. "I can't stay long," he said, not looking at me. "Early flight tomorrow." I told him anyway. Sitting at that table with cold pasta and warm hope, I told him I was pregnant. He went completely still, not shocked, not happy, not angry. Just still, like someone had pressed pause on a person. "Are you sure?" he asked finally. "Yes." "How far along?" 6 weeks. He stood up, walked to the window, stood there with his back to me, hands in his pockets, and I watched him make a decision I wasn't part of. "This isn't the right time," he said to the glass. "There's never a right time. For you, maybe. But I'm in the middle of—" He stopped, started again. "I'm building something, Darlene. Something that could change everything. I can't do this right now." "Do what? Be a father?" He turned then, and I saw it. The calculation, the weighing of options, the moment he chose his future over ours. And this is the part nobody talks about, the moment you actually see someone decide you're not worth the inconvenience. Not in anger, not in passion, just in cold, rational assessment. "I think we need to be realistic about what this means," he said. "About our situation. Our situation. Like the baby was a problem. Like I was a complication in his business plan." "What are you saying?" I asked, even though I already knew. "I'm saying I'm not ready for this. I'm saying I have investors counting on me. A company that's about to scale, opportunities that won't wait, and I'm saying, I'm pregnant. I know." He dragged his hand through his hair. "I know. And I'm sorry. But I can't be what you need right now. I can't be present for this." Present. The word felt like a slap. "Then go," I said quietly. "Darlene. Go. Build your empire. Chase your opportunities. I'll handle this. We should talk about options." "There's only one option I'm considering," I said, hand moving to my stomach. "And it doesn't require your input." He looked at me like I was speaking another language, like he couldn't comprehend choosing anything over ambition. He left 10 minutes later. I never heard from him again. I tried calling twice in the months that followed. Once when the morning sickness got so bad I couldn't keep watered down. Once when I saw his face on a magazine cover at the grocery store. Melvin Parrish, Phoenix's rising business star. Both times, straight to voicemail. Both times, no return call. By the time Jerry was born, Melvin was on billboards. By the time Jerry took his first steps, Melvin was on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. By the time Jerry started school, Melvin's company had gone public, and he was keynoting conferences about innovation and fearlessness. And I was changing diapers and stretching grocery budgets and explaining to my son why we couldn't afford the field trip to the Science Museum. I could have reached out, could have told him he had a son, could have demanded child support or acknowledgement or some scrap of accountability. But I remembered the look in his eyes that night at my table. The calculation. The choice. And I realized, Jerry deserved better than being someone's obligation, someone's complication, someone's footnote in a success story. Jerry deserved someone who chose him. So I never said the name Melvin Parrish out loud again. I deleted the photos, untagged myself from old posts, let him become a memory I didn't feed. And I raised our son alone. People don't talk about the cost of that choice, about the late nights when Jerry was sick and I had no one to spell me, about the school conferences where every form asked for father's information, and I wrote N.A. in careful letters. About the Father's Day projects Jerry brought home with construction paper cards addressed to someone I wish I knew. About the birthday parties where other dads pushed kids on swings and I pushed Jerry and pretended I was enough. I was enough. I made myself enough. But it cost me something I couldn't name. It cost me the ability to believe in people who said the right things, in promises made easily, in men who looked at you like you mattered, and then proved they were just performing. Because Melvin had done all of that, and then he'd chosen himself anyway, which is why Cain terrified me. Because he wasn't making elaborate promises. He was making small, consistent gestures. He wasn't declaring forever. He was just showing up for today. He wasn't saying all the right things. He was doing the quiet things that actually mattered. And somehow, that was worse. Because I could have defended myself against flowers and speeches and dramatic declarations, I knew how to dismiss those. But I didn't know how to dismiss a man who fixed bike chains without being asked, who remembered Jerry's favorite comic book characters, who stood in my garage asking nothing in return. Cain was becoming someone I looked for, someone whose absence felt like a missing piece. He was becoming exactly the kind of significant I'd sworn I'd never let anyone become again. And I didn't know how to stop it. But what I didn't know yet, what no one could have predicted, was that Cain and Melvin were connected. Not just by proximity. By blood. The night Cain brought dinner to celebrate Jerry's clean bill of health, I watched him at my kitchen table and felt my carefully constructed walls crack. He'd brought sparkling cider for Jerry. Real champagne for me. A chocolate cake with "Tough Kid" written in blue frosting. How'd you know blue was his favorite color? I asked. Cain glanced at Jerry's backpack hanging by the door. Blue. His jacket on the hook. Blue. The blanket on the couch. Blue. Lucky guess, Cain said. But his eyes told me it wasn't luck at all. He'd been paying attention. For weeks, he'd been paying attention. And suddenly, I was 9 years in the past, sitting at a different table, trying to tell someone I was pregnant while he looked at his phone. Cain's phone sat face down on the counter, untouched. His whole attention was here. On this moment, on my son's joy. On the way, Jerry talked with his mouth full and demonstrated his completely healed ribs by twisting side to side. Easy, Cain said, the same way he'd said it the day of the accident. Doctor said healed, not indestructible. Jerry grinned. I'm pretty indestructible though. I believe it, Cain said. Then to me, he gets that from you. The same words he'd said that first night in the hospital. And I realized something that made my chest tight, and my hands shake, and my entire body want to run. Cain wasn't just showing up anymore. He was staying. And I was letting him. And the truth about who he really was, that was about to destroy everything. 3 weeks after the accident, Cain suggested the park. Jerry's been cooped up too long, he said. Doctor cleared him for light activity, right? Light, I emphasized. Not climbing or jumping or whatever else 8-year-olds think counts as light. I'll keep him grounded, Cain promised. So we went, the three of us. On a Saturday afternoon, when the October air had finally cooled and the leaves were doing that thing where they turned the whole world gold, Cain brought sandwiches. I brought juice boxes, and the kind of hovering anxiety that comes from almost losing your child. Jerry brought his newly repaired bike, and a stubborn insistence that he was completely fine, Mom, seriously. We found a spot near the playground far enough that Jerry could ride circles on the path, close enough that I could see him the entire time. He's okay, Cain said quietly, reading my face. I know. But you're going to watch him like a hawk anyway. I know that too. Cain smiled. That small, almost smile that I'd learned meant he understood something he wasn't saying out loud. We sat on the grass. Cain unpacked sandwiches, while Jerry made increasingly wide loops on his bike, testing boundaries, celebrating freedom. He's fast, Kane observed. Too fast. That's how we ended up at the hospital. Or maybe that's how he ended up with a story about being indestructible. I glanced at Kane. He was watching Jerry with something gentle in his expression. Not concern. Not worry. Just pride. Like Jerry was his to be proud of. My chest tightened. You're good with him, I said. Kane shrugged. He's easy to be good with. Not everyone thinks so. Kids sense things. They know when adults are performing. I'm not performing. I know, I said quietly. That's what scares me. Kane turned to look at me then, and I saw the question forming. But before he could ask it, Jerry skidded to a stop in front of us, breathless and grinning. Did you see that? I didn't even wobble. I saw, I said. Very impressive. Now drink something before you pass out. Jerry dropped onto the grass between us, grabbing a juice box and chugging it like he'd crossed a desert. Kane handed him a sandwich. Jerry took a huge bite, then started talking around it about a kid at school who could supposedly do a wheelie for 10 seconds straight. That's impossible, Jerry said through bread and turkey. Right, Kane? That's physics-wise impossible. Improbable, Kane corrected. Not impossible. What's the difference? Improbable means unlikely. Impossible means it can't happen at all. Physics says a wheelie's possible. Balance says it's hard. Jerry considered this seriously. So I could learn? Eventually, with practice. Will you teach me? The question came out casual, innocent. But I saw Kane's expression shift. Saw him realize what Jerry was really asking. Not about wheelies. About staying. Yeah, Kane said after a beat. I can teach you. Jerry beamed. Took another massive bite of sandwich. Then his attention snagged on something. Mom, can I see your phone? I want to look up wheelie videos. I handed it over without thinking. Big mistake. Now pay close attention to what happens next. Because this is the moment everything changes. Jerry scrolled for maybe 30 seconds before he went still. That kind of still, that means a child has seen something they're trying to process. Mom? His voice had changed. Younger. Uncertain. What's wrong? Why do you have a picture of Kane on your phone? My blood went cold. What? Jerry turned the screen toward me. And there it was. The photo I'd forgotten I still had. A magazine profile from 2 years ago. Melvin Parrish, standing in front of his Phoenix headquarters, arms crossed, confident smile, that insufferable, I've conquered the world, energy radiating from every pixel. I'd saved it once, in a moment of weakness, wanted to show Jerry someday, maybe, or delete it properly, instead of just avoiding it. I'd never done either. And now, my son was staring at it, confused. That's not Kane, I said automatically. But he looks just like him. Jerry turned to Kane. Doesn't he look like you? Kane had gone completely still. Not the way people freeze when they're surprised. The way they freeze when they already know what's coming and are bracing for impact. He reached for the phone slowly. Jerry handed it over. I watched Kane look at the screen. Watched his jaw tighten. Watched something pass across his face that looked like recognition and resignation, and something else I couldn't name. Where did you get this? Kane asked. His voice was too controlled. I couldn't finish the sentence. Because I knew. Suddenly, horribly, I knew. The name. Parrish. The one that had tugged at my memory that first night in the hospital. The one I'd been too exhausted and grateful to examine. Kane looked up from the phone. Looked directly at me. This is Melvin Parrish, he said. Not a question. I nodded. Couldn't speak. Jerry looked between us, sensing the shift, confused by the sudden tension in the air. Who's that? Jerry asked. Kane's eyes never left mine. My brother. The word hung in the October air like smoke. Brother. The man who saved my son was the brother of the man who abandoned him. The man I was falling for was genetically tied to the man I'd spent 9 years trying to forget. The universe wasn't cruel. It was theatrical. I laughed. I actually laughed. A sharp, disbelieving sound that came from somewhere deep and broken. Of course he is, I said. Of course you are. And here's where most people would have expected drama. Yelling, accusations, but that's not what happened. Because the worst betrayals don't come with screaming. They come with quiet realizations that reshape everything you thought you knew. Kane set the phone down carefully. Don't. I stood up. My legs felt unsteady. Just, don't. Mom? Jerry's voice was small, worried. I looked at my son. At his face that had traces of Melvin in it, the jawline, the way his eyebrows drew together when he was thinking. Features I'd learned to love on Jerry but had tried not to see. And now Kane. The same features. Different expression, different person. But the same blood. Jerry, baby, go ride your bike for a few minutes. Okay? But, please. He looked at Kane, then at me, then back at Kane. Then he went, because he was a good kid who trusted me, even when things didn't make sense. The moment he was out of earshot, I turned to Kane. How long have you known? Known what? Kane asked carefully. Don't play with me. About Jerry. About me and Melvin. How long? I didn't know. Kane stood slowly, hands visible, like approaching something breakable. Not until right now. Not until I saw that photo and understood why you looked at me the way you did that first night. Like you were trying to remember something. The name didn't tip you off? You never said his name. Not once. You talked around it. And Melvin. Kane dragged his hand through his hair. We don't talk. Haven't in years. I didn't know about you. About any of this. I studied his face. Searching for lies. For calculation. For the same expression Melvin had worn when he chose himself over us. I found none of it. Just devastation. This is why you showed up, I said. Some guilt by association thing. Trying to fix your brother's mistakes. No. The word came out sharp. Final. I showed up because a kid almost died, and I could help. I stayed because... He stopped. Started again. I stayed because I wanted to. Wanted to what? Absolve family sin? Wanted to know you, Kane said quietly. Both of you. The honesty in his voice cracked something in me. I sat back down, not because I wanted to, because my legs gave out. Kane sat too, kept distance between us. Smart man. He doesn't know about Jerry, does he? Kane asked after a long moment. The question I'd been dreading. No, you never told him. He made it very clear he didn't want to know. Kane closed his eyes. That sounds like Melvin. You don't talk? Not for 5 years, not since. He trailed off. We had different ideas about what matters. He chose money and image. I chose not being around someone who treated people like they were expendable. I looked at him. Really looked. Is that what he did to you? Among other things, Kane's voice was flat. But that's not your story. Or Jerry's. No, our story is apparently a cosmic joke. Darlene. I'm falling for you, I said. The words came out raw, unplanned. I'm falling for the brother of the man who destroyed me. How is that not a joke? Kane went very still. You're falling for me, he repeated. Was, past tense. Before. Continue. I knew. I don't believe you. Excuse me? I don't believe it's past tense. Kane leaned forward slightly. Because I'm falling too. And finding out Melvin is connected to you doesn't change that. It just makes it more complicated. Complicated, I repeated. That's an understatement. What do you want me to do? Kane asked. Tell me. Do you want me to leave? To disappear? To pretend the last month didn't happen? I don't know what I want. Yes, you do. I met his eyes. Saw the same steadiness that had been there the day Jerry stopped breathing. The same refusal to look away. I want you to not be his brother, I whispered. Can't help you there. I want this to not be impossible. It's not impossible, Kane said quietly. It's just improbable. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Jerry's wheelies. Jerry's wheelies, Kane agreed. We sat there in that park with October gold falling around us, and my son riding circles in the distance, and the truth sitting between us like an uninvited guest. What happens now? I asked. That depends on you. On me? I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to, Kane said. Melvin's my brother by blood, but I choose who I'm loyal to. And I choose you, both of you, if you'll let me. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But I'd believed promises before. I need time, I said. Kane nodded. I'll give you whatever you need. He stood, started to walk away, then stopped. For what it's worth, he said without turning around. Melvin's going to find out eventually. He has a charity event in 3 weeks. Here, in the city. My heart stopped. How do you know? Because I'm technically on the board. I haven't attended in years, but... Kane finally turned. I just thought you should know. In case fate decides it hasn't had enough fun yet. He left then. Left me sitting in a park with October light, and a son who didn't know his world was about to shift. And I realized something that made my hands shake. Fate wasn't done. It was just getting started. And what happened at that charity event? That's when everything exploded. I told myself I wouldn't go to the charity event. Then I told myself again. And again. Every day for 3 weeks, while Kane gave me space, and Jerry asked why Kane didn't come around anymore, and I pretended I had answers I didn't have. But Jerry's school was participating. They'd been selected to showcase their STEM program. Jerry had spent weeks building a model bridge with popsicle sticks and engineering principles he explained to me using words I had to Google. He was so proud. So I went. And what I didn't know was that walking into that building would force a confrontation 9 years in the making. The event was held at the Riverside Convention Center, the kind of place with vaulted ceilings and chandeliers that cost more than my annual salary. Women wore gowns that whispered when they moved. Men wore tuxedos and confidence in equal measure. I wore the one black dress I owned that didn't have stains and shoes that hurt after 20 minutes. Jerry wore khakis and a button-up shirt he'd picked himself, his hair combed flat in a way that would last exactly 10 minutes. "This place is fancy," Jerry whispered as we walked through the main entrance. "Very fancy. Do you think important people will see my bridge?" "I think your bridge is going to be the most important thing here." He grinned. Believed me. Because kids still did that at 8, believed their parents when they said things would be okay. I was about to teach him otherwise. The school displays were set up in the East Hall. Jerry found his station immediately, positioning himself beside his bridge like a tiny engineer ready to defend his thesis. Other kids from his class were there too. Parents hovering, teachers coordinating. I stepped back. Let him have this moment. That's when I heard the voice. Not loud, not close, but familiar, in a way that made my spine straighten and my hands go cold. I turned, and there he was. Melvin Parrish, in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my car, hair styled perfectly, smile practiced and warm, and aimed at a circle of donors who hung on every word, like he was dispensing wisdom instead of networking. He looked exactly the same, and completely different. The same face I'd loved. The same gestures I'd memorized. But polished now. Refined. Like someone had taken the man I knew and replaced him with a showroom version. 9 years. 9 years since I'd seen him in person, and my body remembered everything my mind had tried to forget. The way he laughed, projection, not joy. The way he touched people's arms when he talked, calculated warmth. The way he owned rooms without trying because he genuinely believed he deserved to. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and then his eyes swept the room and landed on me. Now watch what happens when two people who share history they never resolved come face to face. I watched recognition dawn in real time. Confusion first, who is that woman staring at me? Then, recognition, wait, I know her. Then shock, no, that's impossible. His smile faltered, just for a second, then reconstructed itself, but wrong now. Off by degrees, only someone who'd once loved him would notice. He excused himself from his circle, started walking toward me. No, this wasn't happening. Not here, not now. Not with Jerry 20 feet away showing people his bridge. I turned to leave. Darlene. His voice stopped me. Not because I wanted it to, because my body betrayed me with muscle memory. I turned back slowly. Melvin stood 3 feet away, hands in his pockets, looking at me like I was a problem he was trying to calculate his way through. "It's been a long time," he said. 9 years. "You look..." "Don't." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Don't do the pleasantries thing. We're not old friends." Something flickered in his expression. Hurt, maybe, or just surprised that I wasn't making this easy. "You're right," he said. I didn't expect to see you here. My son's school is participating." The words hung between us. My son. I watched him process it. Watched his eyes narrow slightly, doing math he didn't want the answer to. "Your son," he repeated carefully. "Yes. How old? Does it matter?" "Darlene." "Mom." Jerry's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Melvin and I both turned. Jerry was running toward us, excited, oblivious. "Mom, come see." A lady from the tech company said, "My bridge has the best weight distribution ratio in the whole display." He skidded to a stop beside me, looked up at Melvin with curious, open eyes. "Hi, Jerry said. I'm Jerry. I watched Melvin's face. Watched him look at Jerry really look. At the jawline that mirrored his own. At the way Jerry stood with his weight slightly forward. The same way Melvin did. At features that were unmistakably, devastatingly familiar. The color drained from Melvin's face. And this is the moment where everything I'd protected for 9 years came crashing down. This is, Melvin's voice came out rough, your son. Yes. How old is he? 8, Jerry answered cheerfully. My birthday's in February. I'll be 9. I watched Melvin do the math, watched him arrive at the answer, watched him understand what I'd known for 9 years. Darlene, he said quietly, urgently. Can we talk? Privately? No. Please, this is not your story, I finished. Not anymore. He's my, don't. The word came out like a warning. Don't say it. You don't get to claim that. Not after 9 years of silence. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. There's a difference. Jerry looked between us, sensing tension but not understanding it. Mom? Who is this? Before I could answer, another voice joined us. Melvin. Kane. He appeared beside Jerry, placing one hand gently on my son's shoulder, positioning himself between them and Melvin with the kind of instinctive protection that didn't require thought. Melvin stared at his brother. Kane. I didn't know you were coming. Things change. Kane's voice was even, controlled, but I heard the steel underneath. The brothers looked at each other, and something passed between them I couldn't read. History, damage, the weight of shared genetics and separate choices. You know her, Melvin said, not a question. I do. And him? Kane looked down at Jerry, at the boy who was watching this exchange with growing confusion and concern. Yeah, Kane said quietly. I know him. Melvin's jaw tightened. How long? Does it matter? Kane. This isn't the place, Kane interrupted. His hand stayed on Jerry's shoulder. Steady. Grounding. You've got donors waiting, speeches to make. Go do what you do best. It should have sounded like an insult. Somehow it just sounded sad. Melvin looked at me, then at Jerry, then at Kane's hand on Jerry's shoulder. And I saw it happen. The collapse. Internal, controlled, but complete. He understood. Not just that Jerry existed. Not just that Jerry was his. But that he'd missed it. All of it. 9 years of a life he could have been part of and chose not to be. And that someone else had stepped into the space he'd left empty. We should talk, Melvin said again, quieter now, almost pleading. No, I said, we really shouldn't. He's my son. Biologically. The word came out cold, final. That's where it ends. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, sharp and bitter. You want to talk about fair? You walked away. You chose board meetings and ambition, and a life that didn't include complications. You don't get to walk back in now because it's convenient. People were starting to notice, to glance our way. Melvin noticed too. His public face tried to reassert itself. We can discuss this later. There's nothing to discuss. Darlene, I have rights. No, Kane said quietly. But the word carried weight. You don't. The brothers locked eyes. Stay out of this, Melvin said. Can't do that. He's no one's, Kane interrupted. He's his own person. And right now, you're upsetting him. We all looked down. Jerry had gone very quiet, very still. The way kids do when adults are fighting and they don't understand why but know it's about them. Jerry, baby, I said softly, go back to your display. I'll be right there. But, please. He looked at Kane. Kane nodded. I'll be right behind you, buddy. Jerry left reluctantly, looking back 3 times. The moment he was out of earshot, Melvin turned on me. You had no right to keep him from me. I had every right. You made your choice. I didn't know there was a choice to make. Because you didn't ask. You didn't call back. You didn't want to know what happened after you left. So I handled it, like I've handled everything else for 9 years. Melvin ran his hand through his hair, the gesture I used to find endearing, now just performative. I need time to process this. Take all the time you need, I said. Just do it somewhere else. I walked away. Kane followed. Behind us, I heard Melvin say something else, but I didn't stop, didn't turn around. Because I'd realized something standing in that glittering hall with 2 brothers and 1 son. This wasn't Melvin's story to claim. It wasn't even mine to control anymore. It was Jerry's. And Jerry had spent 8 years with one man absent and 3 weeks with another present. Only one of them had earned the right to stand beside him. And it wasn't the one who shared his blood. But the confrontation wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because men like Melvin don't accept being told no. They regroup. They strategize. They come back. And what happened next would test everything Kane and I were building. You know what's wild about situations like this? The person who shares DNA thinks that's enough, that biology equals rights. But those of us who've lived through these moments know the truth: family is built, not inherited. If you've ever had to explain to someone that showing up matters more than genetics, drop a comment, because I want to hear your story. And if you're here because you're still figuring out how to set boundaries with someone who thinks they deserve access they never earned, you're in the right place. We're building a community here of people who understand that blood doesn't equal loyalty. Hit that like button if that resonates, because your story matters just as much as Darlene's. Kane didn't come inside that night. He walked us to the car after the charity event, made sure Jerry was buckled in, then stood in the parking lot with his hands in his pockets while I drove away. I watched him in the rearview mirror until he disappeared into the glow of streetlights. Jerry fell asleep before we made it home, exhausted from excitement and tension he didn't fully understand. I carried him inside. He was getting too big for this, but tonight I needed to, and tucked him into bed with Chester the stuffed dog still clutched in his arms. When I came back downstairs, I found Kane sitting on my porch steps, waiting. Like he had that first night at the hospital, like he'd done a dozen times since, just there. I sat down beside him without a word. We stayed like that for a long time, silent. The October night cool enough to need jackets we weren't wearing. You didn't have to wait, I said finally. Yeah, I did. Kane, I need to tell you something. He wasn't looking at me, eyes fixed on the street, jaw tight. And I need you to just listen. Can you do that? I nodded. He took a breath, let it out slowly. Melvin's my brother. That's not a choice, it's just fact. We share parents, a childhood, genetics. For a long time, that meant something to me. Family loyalty was the one thing I thought you didn't break, no matter what. He paused, rubbed his hands together like they were cold. He wasn't always like this. The Melvin, you knew, the one who walked away, that's who he became. But there was a version before that, when we were kids, when he looked out for me, when family actually meant something to him beyond optics and obligation. I stayed quiet. Let him talk. 5 years ago, he did something I couldn't forgive. Screwed over a business partner who trusted him. Destroyed the guy's reputation to protect his own. When I confronted him, he said, "That's just how the game is played. That winning matters more than how you win." Kane's voice went flat, empty. I walked away, told him we were done. He didn't fight it, didn't even seem surprised. Like he'd been expecting someone to abandon him eventually, and I was just keeping the pattern going. Kane, let me finish. He finally looked at me. Tonight, standing there, seeing Jerry, seeing you, I had a choice to make. Stay loyal to blood, or choose the people who actually deserve loyalty. My breath caught. And here's the thing about choices. They're only real when both options cost you something. Walking away from Melvin years ago cost me my only family. But walking away from you, from Jerry, that would cost me everything that matters now. He shifted to face me fully. Eyes dark and steady, and absolutely certain. I choose you, Darlene. Both of you. Not because Melvin's my brother and I'm trying to fix his mistakes. Not because I feel guilty or obligated. But because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be part of something real. And I don't want to lose that. The words landed like stones in water, heavy, rippling. What about your brother? I whispered. What about him? He's going to want a relationship with Jerry. Rights, time. He has money and lawyers, and you have 9 years of showing up every single day, Kane interrupted. You have proof, you have Jerry's trust, and you have me, if you want me. This will destroy what's left of your relationship with him. There's nothing left to destroy. Family is complicated. Darlene. Kane caught my hand. The first time he'd initiated touch since the park. His palm was warm, rough, real. I'm not conflicted about this. Melvin made his choice 9 years ago. I'm making mine now. Those are two separate things. I stared at our hands, at the way his fingers wrapped around mine like they belonged there. I'm terrified, I admitted. Of what? That you'll leave. That 3 months from now, or 6, or a year, you'll realize this is too complicated. That blood actually does matter more than choice. That I'm not worth the mess. Kane was quiet for a moment. Then, you remember what I said to you the day of the accident? Which part? When you asked me not to let Jerry die. I said, I promise I won't let him. You remember that? Yes. I don't make promises I can't keep. His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. So I'm not going to promise I'll never leave. I'm not going to promise this will be easy. But I will promise that I show up. That I mean what I say. That when things get complicated, and they will, I stay and work through it, instead of disappearing. Something in my chest cracked open. Because Melvin had promised forever and delivered silence. And Kane was promising consistency and actually demonstrating it. That's not romantic, I said, voice breaking. No, it's better. It's real. And he was right. Grand gestures were easy. Promises were cheap. Any man could say the right things when life was simple. But Kane had stood in the rain when my son stopped breathing. Had waited in hospitals without being asked. Had fixed bike chains and brought comic books and made sad lava jokes. Had positioned himself between Jerry and Melvin without hesitation. Had chosen us over blood. Not once, repeatedly, consistently, every single time it mattered. That wasn't romance. That was love. The real kind. The kind built in ordinary moments and tested under pressure. The kind that didn't require perfect circumstances or ideal timing. The kind I'd stopped believing in. I'm falling in love with you, I said, not past tense this time. Present, ongoing. True. Kane's expression softened. I know. I'm falling too. This is going to be messy. Probably. Melvin's going to fight for access to Jerry. He has resources. And we have truth, Kane said. Jerry knows who's been there. That matters more than genetics or money. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe truth won over power. Choosing you means closing the door on Melvin, I said quietly. Permanently. It means telling Jerry the truth about who his father is and why he was never around. It means potential court battles and Jerry being caught in the middle of something he didn't create. I know. It means you might have to testify against your own brother. I know that too. Kane, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm choosing. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, his hand cupped my face. Warm. Steady. Real. Melvin had 9 years to make a different choice. He's had 3 weeks since finding out about Jerry to reach out, to apologize, to do anything except calculate his next move. That's who he is now. And I can't fix that. But you think you can fix us? I asked. No. His thumb brushed my cheek. I think we're not broken. I think we're just careful. And I think careful people deserve someone who shows up anyway. The tears came then, quiet, relieved. Because he was right. I wasn't broken. I was just a woman who'd learned to expect disappointment and built walls accordingly. And Kane wasn't trying to tear those walls down with grand gestures or passionate speeches. He was just staying, brick by brick, day by day, until the walls didn't seem as necessary anymore. I stepped forward, let my forehead rest against his chest, felt his arms come around me careful, asking permission even now. I choose you too, I whispered into his shirt. Both of us choose you. His arms tightened, just slightly, just enough. We stood like that in my kitchen, with cold night air and warm certainty, and I realized something that should have terrified me but didn't. I was surrendering. Not out of desperation, not because I needed saving, but because I'd found someone who stayed during storms instead of running from them. That was worth the risk. That was worth closing doors I'd left cracked open just in case. That was worth telling Melvin Parrish that his son already had someone who earned the title he'd abandoned. When Melvin comes back, I said against Kane's chest, and he will come back, this gets permanent. You understand that? Once I tell him he has no claim, once I choose you publicly, there's no going back. Good, Kane said simply. I don't want to go back. I pulled away enough to look at him. Your brother will never forgive this. My brother never forgave himself for becoming someone unforgivable. Kane's voice was sad but certain. That's not my responsibility anymore. What is your responsibility? Showing up, for you, for Jerry, every day, that's it. It should have sounded simple, basic, underwhelming. Instead, it sounded like everything. I kissed him then, not desperate or passionate or dramatic, just certain, a period at the end of a sentence I'd been writing for 9 years. This was my choice. Kane, us, the messy, complicated, beautiful truth of building something real. And if that meant permanently closing the door on Melvin Parrish's belated awakening, then that door was already closed. It had been for 9 years. I was just finally ready to lock it. But Melvin wasn't done trying to force it open, and what happened in the weeks that followed would test whether what Kane and I were building could withstand the pressure of a billionaire who suddenly decided he wanted to play father. Melvin showed up on a Tuesday. Not at my door. He wasn't that bold. He was waiting by my car when I picked Jerry up from school. Leaning against a black Mercedes that probably cost more than my house, wearing jeans and a sweater like he was trying to look approachable. It didn't work. Jerry saw him first. "Mom, isn't that the man from the fancy building?" "Yes," I said quietly. "Get in the car, baby. But, now, please." Something in my voice made Jerry obey. He climbed into the back seat, and I turned to face Melvin. "What are you doing here?" "I needed to see you. You won't return my calls. Because I have nothing to say to you. Darlene, please." He pushed off the car, hands out like he was approaching something skittish. "I just want to talk. 5 minutes. That's all." "No, he's my son." Biologically, the word came out sharp. "That's where your claim ends. I know I wasn't there. I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I laughed, hard and bitter. "You didn't make mistakes, Melvin. You made choices. There's a difference." He flinched. "Good. You're right," he said quietly. "I made choices, bad ones, but I want a chance to fix that. To be in his life. To be his father. You can't be his father. That position's been vacant for 9 years. You don't get to fill it now because it's convenient. It's not about convenience. Then what's it about? Guilt? Image? Completeness?" I stepped closer, anger burning through the careful control I'd maintained. "Because it's not about Jerry. If it was about Jerry, you would have called me back 9 years ago, when I was alone and terrified and trying to figure out how to raise a baby by myself." Melvin looked at the ground. "I was wrong. I know that now. Congratulations. You figured out basic human decency a decade late." "Darlene." "Mom?" Jerry's voice came from the car window, small, uncertain. Melvin's eyes went to him immediately, hungry, desperate. "Can I at least meet him properly?" Melvin asked. "Let him know who I am?" Every instinct screamed no, but Jerry was watching, already confused, already sensing something significant. 5 minutes, I said. "In the park across the street. Public. And if he wants you to leave, you leave." Melvin nodded quickly. "Yes, of course, thank you." Now watch how a child's honesty cuts through years of adult complication in ways we never expect. We sat at a picnic table while Jerry stood nearby, uncertain, holding Chester, the stuffed dog he'd brought from the car. Kane had given him that dog. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Jerry," I said gently, "this is Melvin Parrish. He's someone I knew a long time ago." Melvin leaned forward, eager. Too eager. "Hi, Jerry. I've heard a lot about you. Your bridge project sounds incredible." Jerry looked at me, then back at Melvin. "How do you know about my bridge?" "I was at the event. I saw it. You did amazing work." "Oh." Jerry shifted his weight. "Thanks." Awkward silence. Melvin tried again. "Your mom tells me you like engineering?" "I guess." "That's great. Really great. I was interested in building things when I was your age too." Jerry nodded politely, the way kids do when adults are trying too hard. Melvin kept pushing. "Maybe I could take you to my office sometime, show you some of the projects we're working on. We have this incredible robotics division." "Do you know Kane?" Jerry interrupted. Melvin went still. "Yes, he's my brother." Jerry's eyes widened. "Really? Really? That's weird. You don't seem like brothers." "What do you mean?" Jerry shrugged. "Kane's nice." The words landed like stones. Innocent. Devastating. Melvin's expression crumpled slightly before he reconstructed it. "I'm nice too. I want to be nice to you." I want to. I want to know you, Jerry. Why? Because, Melvin glanced at me. Back to Jerry. Because you're important. And I should have known that sooner. But you didn't, Jerry said. Not cruel, just factual. No, I didn't, but I'm here now. Jerry considered this with the seriousness only 8-year-olds can manage. Kane says showing up late is better than not showing up at all. But showing up on time is better than both. Melvin's jaw tightened. Kane said that? Yeah, when I was late to school once because I couldn't find my backpack. Of course Kane had been there for that. Of course he'd turned it into a lesson about reliability. Your mom and I need to talk about some grown-up things, Melvin said, trying to regain control. But I hope we can spend more time together, get to know each other. I don't know, Jerry said honestly. That seems weird. Why weird? Because I don't know you. And Mom looks upset. And Kane? He stopped. Looked at me. Where's Kane? At work, baby. Does he know about this? Yes. Is he okay with it? How did I answer that? How did I explain adult complications to a child who just wanted simple truth? Kane wants whatever makes us happy, I said carefully. Jerry nodded, then turned to Melvin. I think I want to go home now. Melvin tried 3 more times over the next 2 weeks. Coffee shop meetups, I declined. Gifts sent to the house, I returned. A formal letter from a lawyer, I forwarded to my own. Each time Jerry asked the same question. Why is he trying so hard now? And each time, I struggled to answer in a way that was honest but not cruel. Kane, meanwhile, did the opposite of what I expected. He stepped back. Not away. Just back. He didn't compete. Didn't badmouth Melvin. Didn't try to prove he was better. He just kept being exactly who he'd always been: present, consistent, steady. Doesn't it bother you? I asked one night after Jerry was asleep. Melvin trying to swoop in? No, Kane said simply. Why not? Because Jerry's not a prize to be won. He's a person who gets to decide who matters to him. And I trust that he'll figure it out. What if he chooses Melvin? What if the novelty of a rich, successful biological father outweighs everything you've done? Kane looked at me steadily. Then I'll be sad. But I won't stop showing up, because that's not conditional on whether he picks me. And that's when I understood the difference. Melvin wanted to be Jerry's father because Jerry was his. Kane was already Jerry's family because Jerry was Jerry. The conversation I'd been dreading came on a Sunday morning. Jerry was eating cereal at the kitchen table. I was making coffee. Normal. Ordinary. Then Jerry said, "Mom, is Melvin my dad?" The spoon in my hand stopped moving. Why do you ask that? Because he keeps showing up, and he looks like me a little. And Kane said he's his brother, and families look alike, so... He trailed off. Is he? I sat down across from him, looked at my son, my brave, smart, perceptive son, and told him the truth. Yes, biologically, Melvin is your father. Jerry absorbed this. Why didn't you tell me before? Because he wasn't around, and I didn't want you to feel like you were missing something. But I was missing something, Jerry said quietly. A dad. The words hit like a fist. I know, baby. I'm sorry. It's not your fault, Jerry said. Then, is it his fault? It's complicated. That's what adults say when they don't want to explain. He was right. Melvin chose other things over being your father, I said carefully. That was his choice. Not yours, not mine. His. Jerry stirred his cereal. And Kane? What about Kane? Did he choose us? Or does he just feel bad for Melvin's choice? The question was so mature, it broke my heart. Ask him yourself, I said. Because Jerry deserved to hear it directly. That afternoon, Jerry climbed into Kane's lap on the couch, something he'd started doing naturally over the past months, and asked the question, "Did you choose us because you wanted to, or because Melvin didn't?" Kane didn't hesitate. I chose you because of who you are. Not because of what anyone else did or didn't do. But Melvin's your brother. He is. And you picked us over him? I picked what's right. And being in your life feels right. Jerry was quiet for a long moment. Then, Mom says families are people who show up. Is that true? I think so. Then are you my family? Kane looked at me. I nodded. If you want me to be, Kane said softly. Jerry thought about this. I think family is people who know what you like for breakfast and don't check their phone when you're talking, and teach you stuff, even when it's boring. That's a good definition, Kane said. Then yeah, Jerry decided. You're my family. Then he looked at me with those eyes that saw too much and understood too well. So who's Melvin? Jerry asked. If Kane's my family, but Melvin's my dad, what does that make Melvin? And I realized my 8-year-old son had just asked the question that would define everything that came next. The answer came in the days that followed, and it would surprise all of us. Here's what I need you to understand about this moment. Jerry just articulated something most adults spend years trying to figure out. That titles don't matter if there's no substance behind them. If you've ever had to explain to a child why someone who should have been there wasn't, or why someone who didn't have to be there chose to stay, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because this isn't just Darlene's story. It's the story of every parent who's had to fill 2 roles. Every person who's chosen to love someone else's child like their own. Every kid who figured out that family is built, not assigned. Drop a comment if you know exactly what Jerry's feeling right now. And hit subscribe because we're about to get to the resolution and it's going to be worth the wait. 3 weeks after Jerry asked his question about what Melvin was to him, the answer started revealing itself in the quietest way possible. Not through confrontations or declarations. Through mornings. Kane was at our house most mornings now. Not because he'd moved in, we hadn't gotten there yet, but because he'd somehow become part of our routine without anyone formally deciding it should happen. He made coffee the way I liked it. He reminded Jerry to brush his teeth. He checked homework and packed lunches, and drove Jerry to school on days when my car decided it didn't want to start. He did the unglamorous work of showing up, again, and again, and again. And slowly, I stopped waiting for him to leave. Melvin sent a text on a Wednesday. Melvin, I understand why you're protecting him. I would too, if I'd been there to know what that meant. Then another the next day. Melvin, Kane's lucky. Tell him I said that. And finally, a week later. Melvin, I'm not going away, but I'm not fighting you either. When Jerry's ready, if he's ever ready, I'll be here. I showed the messages to Kane one evening after Jerry was asleep. He's letting go, I said. He's accepting reality, Kane corrected. That's not the same thing. Will you regret this, choosing us over him? Kane set down the message thread. Looked at me with absolute certainty. Darlene, I didn't choose you over him. I chose you because of you. Melvin was already gone long before I met you. But he's your brother. And you're the woman I love. He said it simply. Factually. Like it was obvious. Jerry's the kid I want to watch grow up. That's not a sacrifice. That's a choice I'd make 1,000 times. The woman I love. He'd said it so casually. Like it had been true for so long that announcing it was just confirming what we both already knew. I love you too, I said. In case that wasn't clear. It was clear. Kane pulled me closer. You think I fix faucets for just anyone? I laughed against his shoulder. Is that your metric for love? Plumbing repair? Among other things. There's also the grocery shopping, the bike maintenance, the listening to 8-year-old engineering theories without falling asleep. Wow. So romantic. I told you I wasn't romantic. I'm consistent. And he was right. Romance was flowers and poetry and grand gestures that burned bright and fast. What Kane offered was better. He offered permanence, the kind built in small moments, the kind that didn't require perfect conditions or ideal circumstances, the kind that simply showed up, again and again, until showing up became the foundation everything else was built on. On a Saturday in late November, Kane took Jerry to the hardware store to pick out materials for a new project. I stayed home, intending to catch up on laundry. Instead, I found myself in Jerry's room, looking at the photos on his wall. Birthday parties, school events, beach trips, 9 years of memories featuring one parent, doing her best, making it work. But the recent photos, the ones from the last few months, looked different. There were 3 people now. Jerry in the middle, arms around both of us. Kane teaching him to ride. The 3 of us at the park. Thanksgiving dinner just last week, where Kane had carved the turkey, and Jerry had insisted on saying grace, and thanked God for people who stay. The photos told a story my heart had been too afraid to acknowledge. We weren't a mother and son anymore. We were a family. Not because biology said so. Not because paperwork or ceremonies or official declarations made it true. But because love didn't wait for permission. It just happened. In faucet repairs and wheelie lessons and homework help and showing up every single day, even when it was inconvenient. I heard the front door open, Jerry's voice calling, "Mom, you should see what we got." They came upstairs, Jerry carrying a bag of supplies, Kane behind him with lumber balanced on his shoulder. "We're building a bookshelf," Jerry announced, "for all my engineering books. Kane says, if I'm going to be serious about it, I need proper organization." "Sounds important," I said. "Very important." Jerry was already unpacking supplies on his bedroom floor. "Can we start now?" "After lunch," Kane said. "And after you clean up this room, so we have space to work." Jerry groaned, but obeyed, because Kane had somehow earned the authority to set boundaries, without Jerry resenting them. Kane caught my expression. "What?" "Nothing. Just..." I shook my head. "Thank you." "For what?" "For being exactly who you are." He kissed my forehead. Casual. Natural. Like he'd done it 1,000 times, even though it had only been a few weeks since we'd crossed that line. "Go be Jerry's dad," I said softly. Kane paused, looked at me carefully. "Is that what I am?" "If you want to be." "I want to be." "Then that's what you are." He smiled, full and real and completely unguarded. Then he went to build a bookshelf with my son, while I stood in the hallway and let myself feel something I'd forbidden for 9 years. Peace. Not the kind that comes from having everything figured out, but the kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong, with people who choose you as much as you choose them. That night, after the bookshelf was partially built, and Jerry was asleep, and Kane and I were on the couch with coffee, neither of us was drinking, I asked the question I'd been avoiding. What happens next? With what? With us. With Jerry. With everything. Kane considered. We keep doing what we're doing. I keep showing up. You keep letting me. Jerry keeps growing up with 2 people who love him. Eventually, maybe we make it official. Official how? However you want. Marriage, adoption, or just this. What we have now, you'd be okay with just this? Darlene. He turned to face me fully. I'm not here for titles or paperwork. I'm here because this is where I want to be. Call me whatever you want. Just don't ask me to leave. I won't, I promised. Then we're good. And we were. Not perfect. Not without complications. Melvin still existed on the periphery. Legal questions would eventually need answers. Jerry would have hard questions as he got older. But we were good. Because love that doesn't ask permission also doesn't require perfect conditions. It just requires people willing to show up and figure it out together. And we were willing. All 3 of us. That was enough. That was everything. And the future? The future was about to become more official than any of us expected. 18 months after the accident, Jerry turned 10. We celebrated with chocolate cake, the same bakery Kane had used for the tough kid cake that first time, and a small party in our backyard. Jerry's friends from school, a few neighbors, my sister who'd finally stopped asking if I was sure about this Kane situation. I was sure. Kane spent the afternoon manning the grill, fielding questions from 10-year-old boys about whether hot dogs counted as engineering, depends on the structural integrity of the bun, and wearing a ridiculous party hat Jerry had insisted he put on. He looked happy, settled, like someone who'd found exactly where he belonged and stopped questioning it. "Mom," Jerry called from across the yard, "Kane says I can get a new bike, a real one, with gears." "Did he now?" I looked at Kane, who shrugged with zero remorse. "Kid's been riding that patched-up bike for 2 years. He's earned an upgrade. You're spoiling him. That's my job." And it was. Somehow, without formal declarations or legal documents, Kane had stepped fully into a role he'd never auditioned for. He showed up to parent-teacher conferences, knew Jerry's friends by name, had opinions about bedtimes and screen limits, and whether Jerry was old enough for a phone yet. No, we'd agreed. Not until middle school. He'd become what Melvin never was. Present. Melvin sent a birthday card. It arrived the day before the party. Expensive cardstock. Handwritten message. "Happy 10th birthday, Jerry. Wishing you all the best. M.P." Generic, distant, respectful of boundaries. Jerry read it once, said, "Okay," and set it on his desk next to photos of his actual life. He didn't ask to see Melvin, didn't express longing or resentment, just acknowledged the card existed and moved on. Because that's what you do with people who are technically connected but functionally absent. You make space for them in the margins, without letting them occupy the center. Melvin had become exactly what he'd chosen to be, optional. That evening, after the party wound down and Jerry crashed on the couch with a sugar headache, Kane and I cleaned up the backyard in comfortable silence. "Good party," Kane said, tossing paper plates into a trash bag. "You ate 4 hot dogs." I was supervising quality control. "That's what we're calling it?" He grinned. That full smile I'd learned meant he was exactly where he wanted to be. We finished cleaning. I made coffee. Kane sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd once told him I was falling in love with him, terrified it would end badly. It hadn't ended. It had just continued. Day after day, month after month, building something so stable I sometimes forgot it hadn't always existed. "I've been thinking," Kane said. "Dangerous. About making this official." My heart stuttered. "Define official." He reached across the table, took my hand. "I want to adopt Jerry. Legally. If you're okay with that." "If he's okay with that." I stared at him. "You've thought about this." For months, I didn't want to rush it, didn't want it to feel like I was trying to erase Melvin or replace anyone. But Jerry calls me when he's scared, asks me for advice, wants me at his school events. That's not going to change when he's 15 or 20 or 40, so why not make it official? Melvin would have to consent. I know, I already asked him. "You what?" Kane's expression was steady, calm. "I called him 2 weeks ago, told him what I wanted to do, asked if he'd sign the papers. And he said yes, said it was the right thing, that Jerry deserves someone who's actually there." My throat tightened. He really said that? He did. Melvin's not a bad person, Darlene. He's just limited. He chose a life that doesn't have space for messy human things like fatherhood. But he knows what he gave up, and he knows I didn't. I looked at this man who'd run into the rain for a stranger's child and never stopped running toward us. "Jerry would love that," I whispered. "And you?" "I would love that too." Kane squeezed my hand. "Then, let's do it. Make this family official. Not because we need paperwork to prove what we are, but because Jerry deserves to know it's permanent." Permanent. The word I'd been too afraid to believe in. The concept I'd learned not to trust. But Kane had proven it. Not with promises, with presence. Every day, for 18 months. Through hard conversations and awkward moments, and the daily mundane reality of raising a child who wasn't biologically his, he'd stayed. Not because it was easy, but because he chose to. I almost lost Kane that Tuesday night. He showed up at my door past midnight, still in work clothes, looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. "I talked to Melvin today," Kane said without preamble, "about the adoption." My stomach dropped. He asked if I was sure. Said adopting Jerry would burn the last bridge between us. Said some things about loyalty and blood that he trailed off. And I could barely breathe. Kane met my eyes. And I told him Jerry already is my family, that I chose him the day I knelt in the rain, that showing up matters more than DNA. He stepped closer. "I'm sure, Darlene. I just needed you to know." He tried to talk me out of it, and that it didn't work. I kissed him then. Because some men deserve to be chosen back. We told Jerry the next morning over pancakes. "How would you feel," Kane started carefully, "if I adopted you? Legally became your dad?" Jerry looked up from his syrup-drowned plate. "Would that mean your last name would be on my stuff? If you wanted, would you still be here if I said no?" "Yes, this doesn't change how I feel about you. It just makes official what's already true." Jerry considered this with the seriousness only 10-year-olds approaching wisdom can manage. "What about Melvin?" "He gave permission. He knows this is right." "Does that make him not my dad anymore?" Kane shook his head. "No. Biology doesn't change, but family is who shows up, and I want to show up for you officially, for always." Jerry looked at me. "Mom? It's your choice, baby. Whatever you want." He thought for another moment. Then, "Okay, let's do it." Yeah, you're already my dad anyway. Might as well make it official." He said it so casually, like it was obvious, like Kane had been his father all along and we were just catching the paperwork up to reality. Kane's eyes went bright. He blinked quickly, smiled. "All right then, we'll make it official." Jerry went back to his pancakes. Crisis resolved. Life continuing. But I saw Kane's hand shake slightly as he lifted his coffee mug. Saw him look at Jerry with something so tender it made my chest ache. This was what love looked like. Not the dramatic version, not the romance novel kind. Just this: pancakes and paperwork, and a man who chose to stay when staying was harder than leaving. 6 months later, the adoption was finalized. We celebrated quietly. Dinner at Jerry's favorite restaurant. A certificate that would go in the safe. A new birth certificate listing Kane Parrish as father. Jerry was more excited about the dessert than the legal milestone, because to him, nothing had actually changed. Kane had already been his dad for 2 years. This just made the rest of the world acknowledge it. That night, after Jerry was asleep, Kane and I stood in the doorway of his room, watching him sleep the way parents do. "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" "For proving me wrong. About men, about trust, about whether it's possible to build something real after everything falls apart." Kane pulled me closer. "You built something real. I just joined what you'd already started. We built it together." "Yeah," he agreed. "We did." We stood there in the half-dark, watching our son sleep with Chester, the stuffed dog still tucked under his arm. And I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago. Terrified, guarded, convinced that loving someone meant setting yourself up for abandonment. She wouldn't recognize me now. I'd learned that safety wasn't the absence of risk. It was choosing someone whose consistency proved they were worth the risk. I'd learned that family wasn't who gave you DNA. It was who stayed when staying was a choice they could have avoided. I'd learned that love didn't require perfect conditions. Just imperfect people willing to show up anyway. Kane had taught me all of that. Not with words, with presence. And I'd taught him something too. That being chosen matters more than being needed. That showing up for people who could survive without you, but thrive with you, is the highest form of love. We taught each other that families aren't found or made, they're built, day by day, choice by choice. You know what makes this story different from a fairy tale? It's real. It's the kind of thing that happens when people stop waiting for perfect and start building with what's actually in front of them. If this story made you think about someone in your life who chose you when they didn't have to tag them, share this with them. Let them know their consistency didn't go unnoticed. And if you're someone who's still rebuilding after being left, still learning to trust again, still wondering if love without drama is actually possible, it is. Subscribe to this channel because we tell those stories here. The ones about women who survived and rebuilt and found love in the most unexpected places. Real love. The kind that shows up for pancakes and parent-teacher conferences and doesn't need applause. I thought about the opening line of this story sometimes, the one I'd carry forever. I didn't know the man kneeling in the rain beside my dying son would turn out to be the brother of the man who abandoned us both. It should have been a tragedy, a cosmic joke, proof that the universe had a cruel sense of irony. Instead, it became proof of something else entirely. That bloodlines don't determine devotion. That the worst endings can lead to the best beginnings. That sometimes the right person shows up in the least likely package. And that love, real love, doesn't announce itself with grand gestures. It just shows up, again and again, until showing up becomes the foundation everything else is built on. Kane knelt in the rain beside my dying son 2 years ago, and he never stood back up and walked away. Not when it got complicated. Not when he learned who Melvin was. Not when choosing us meant losing his only family. Not when the easy thing would have been to step aside and let biology sort itself out. He stayed through bike repairs and hospital visits and park confrontations and legal paperwork. He stayed through Jerry's questions and my fears and Melvin's attempts to reclaim what he'd abandoned. He stayed when staying was inconvenient and uncomfortable and required him to redefine what family meant. He stayed because that's what people who love you actually do. They don't promise forever in parking lots and disappear when it matters. They don't show up for the highlight reel and vanish during the hard parts. They don't choose you when it's convenient and reconsider when it costs something. They just stay. Day after ordinary day. Making coffee and fixing faucets and teaching wheelies and showing up to 4th grade science fairs like they're the most important events in the world. Because to the people they love, they are. Jerry's 11 now, starting middle school next year. Already talking about engineering programs and college tours that feel impossibly far away and terrifyingly close. Kane's teaching him to drive in empty parking lots, illegally, because the kid needs to know the basics before he's 15 and has actual stakes. I've stopped waiting for Cain to leave, stopped bracing for the other shoe to drop, stopped treating permanence like a temporary condition. Because some people actually mean it when they show up. Some people see you at your most broken and decide that's exactly when you need them most. Some people prove through 10,000 small choices that love isn't about the big moments, it's about who's still there when the moments aren't big at all. Melvin sends birthday cards, Christmas cards, the occasional text checking in. He's dating someone seriously now, I heard. Maybe he'll have other children. Maybe he'll do better the second time. I hope he does. Not for me. For them. Because everyone deserves someone who stays. Jerry asks about him sometimes. Curious, not longing. We've told him the truth, age-appropriate versions, that will grow more complete as he does. He knows Melvin is his biological father. He knows Melvin made choices that hurt people. He knows Melvin is trying, in his limited way, to do better now. And he knows Cain is his dad. Not because a piece of paper says so, because 2 years of showing up said so first. Last week, Jerry came home from school upset. Some kid had made a comment about his fake dad. Cain found him in his room, door closed, music too loud. He knocked, waited, was invited in. I didn't eavesdrop. But later, Jerry came downstairs lighter. Cain came down after, and I asked what happened. Kid at school said some stuff about adoption, Cain said. Jerry was processing. What'd you tell him? That biology is an accident, but family is a choice. And he gets to decide what matters. Simple, true, perfect. That's Cain. No grand speeches, no dramatic declarations. Just truth delivered gently by someone who's earned the right to say it. If you made it to the end of this story, you're part of something. You're part of a community that understands that the best love stories aren't about finding perfect people, they're about imperfect people choosing each other anyway. Drop a comment and tell me, who's your Cain? Who's the person who showed up when they didn't have to? Because I read every single comment, and your stories matter just as much as Darlene's. Hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about women who rebuilt their lives after everything fell apart. Share this video with someone who needs to know that choosing yourself and choosing love aren't mutually exclusive. And if you're still healing from someone who left, know this: the right person won't make you beg them to stay. They'll just stay. That's the whole point. That's the entire story. Now, go live yours. 2 years after a bike accident in the rain, I stood in my kitchen watching Cain teach Jerry how to make pancakes the real way, he insisted. Not from a box, and I realized something profound. This was the life I'd stopped believing I could have. Not perfect, not without scars, not without the ghosts of choices made and unmade, but real, built by people who chose each other daily, sustained by the kind of love that doesn't require perfect conditions, just consistent effort. I'd spent 9 years believing that being enough for Jerry meant doing it alone. I was wrong. Being enough meant knowing when to let someone else be enough too. It meant recognizing that accepting help wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. It meant understanding that Jerry didn't need a perfect family. He needed a real one. And real families aren't defined by who started the story. They're defined by who stayed to see how it ends. Cain looked up from the stove, caught me watching, smiled that small smile that meant everything. Jerry flipped a pancake badly, batter everywhere, and laughed. And I thought about all the women watching this, who are where I was 2 years ago. Doing it alone, doing it well, but exhausted from pretending they don't need anyone. Here's what I'd tell them. You can be strong and still let someone in. You can be independent and still build something with someone. You can have been hurt before and still risk being hurt again. Because the alternative, living in a fortress you built to keep pain out, also keeps everything else out. Joy, partnership, the kind of love that makes ordinary moments feel extraordinary. The kind that shows up with comic books and stays for a lifetime. I didn't know the man kneeling in the rain beside my dying son would turn out to be the brother of the man who abandoned us both. But here's what I do know now. Some people run toward disaster when everyone else runs away. Some people see your broken pieces and don't try to fix them. They just stand beside you while you figure out how they fit back together. Some people mean it when they say they're not going anywhere. And some people prove that family isn't about blood or biology or perfect circumstances. It's about who shows up, who stays, who chooses you. Not once, but every single day. This time, someone stayed. And that changed everything.